Welcome to this week's live. We're going to be continuing to talk about nervous system dysregulation because this is a really big subject, and we spoke first about the mechanisms that drive nervous system dysregulation, and then we spoke about what you can do to overcome and heal. So the summary of that was these slides here. So mind-body therapies, psychological therapy, managing thoughts and feelings, rebalancing biochemistry, and changing lifestyle habits. All of these points can help facilitate nervous system dysregulation or dysautonomia, which is one of the main driving things of perpetuating long COVID. So for this presentation, I wanted to do a deeper dive into mind-body therapies, and in particular, somatic experiencing. Somatic experiencing is a mind-body practice that was developed by Peter Levine. And he basically developed this therapy when he was observing animals in the wild. And what he would notice is that animals have their own way of kind of discharging trauma through the body. And they do this through things like shaking, certain movements, certain ways of breathing. Sometimes it's this fight or flight where they're running away, and sometimes they'll drop down and freeze and play dead. But what he noticed is that all animals have a way to kind of process this stress and this trauma through different kinds of movements and different kinds of ways in which they breathe. And this means that you don't really come across PTSD, for example, because they needed to run away from a fox, or deers, running away in the African savannah. And, it's not that they never leave the cover of the trees again. They find ways to recover and move on. So you can actually have a look at these videos online of different animals. I think I have an example here. So this one, polar bear shaking. So this is an interesting video. If you go onto, you can actually see how this polar bear was captured, and they were doing some kind of research on bears, and then you can watch the video and see how it was shaking and breathing and kind of recovering from this trauma. And this is something that humans have forgotten how to do and have lost the practice of doing. And as a result, trauma can get trapped in the body. And when I say trauma, this can be the result of a surgery. It can be an accident. It can also be chronic buildup of stress. So chronic stresses that build and build over time. Trauma manifests in lots of different ways as sudden things that happened a long time ago, or a chronic buildup of things. So Peter Levine has developed, different types of ways to address this trauma. And kind of the principles are outlined here. So don't relive, renegotiate. The idea is that it's not necessarily the event that is causing the trauma, but it's the fact that your body gets trapped in this kind of state and isn't able to recover from it. And the important thing that differentiates somatic experiencing from, let's say, talk therapy is that it accesses the body memory of the event rather than the cognitive memory. So when you're doing somatic experiencing, with a practitioner, you don't even have to tell them and speak about, the specific trauma or whatever it is that you're trying to overcome, because they're not accessing it from your memory or from your mind, but from your body's point of view. So this is really important, and it's a main differentiating factor. The other thing is this idea of taking time, so titration. So it's the slow release of compressed survival energy is how Peter Levine explains it. And our body time is actually a lot slower than our cognitive time or our emotional time. And, you know, we often think that we've overcome something, maybe emotionally, or we tell ourselves a story that we're over something. But in actual fact, our body is still some kind of stuck in the experience of it. And through the process of somatic experiencing, you're able to tune in and notice where your body is at in the experience and be connected and honoring of that. So another thing is bottom up processing. So again, this is a body centered approach that helps to contradict the tension in the body. It's not necessarily, as I said, about re-remembering or changing thoughts and beliefs. It's not about that. It's very different to different types of talk therapy that you might have heard about. So pendulation is another key practice that he uses. So this is the natural oscillations that happen between expansion and contraction. So one thing that you might have noticed in any kind of recovery journey, actually, it doesn't even have to be trauma, is this experience of expansion and contraction. And this is a great video. This is Peter Levine. So this is him explaining the concept with using a Hoberman sphere. And the idea is that before every expansion, we have some kind of contraction. And often the contraction can feel bad. And that can be the point where we feel that you're regressing and that, no, this is bad. And I'm noticing this tension in the body. But then this happens before a natural expansion. And the idea of somatic experiencing is to create an ease and flow, what he calls pendulation between these contractions and expansions that eventually lead, you might contract a little bit, but then the bigger movement is always expanding outwards. So yeah, if you check out this video, he explains this concept quite well. And he also likens this to an amoeba. So, expansion and contraction as a concept happens on a cellular level, even and contract. And the idea of expansion and contraction is, honored all the way up to the whole organism. So here are some of the tools that he uses in somatic experiencing. So this is a SMOVI. So it regulates activated and disassociated nervous systems, and the way it's used is through swinging. There are different activities that you can see online where you're swinging this tool. And yeah, so it mobilizes the body through sound, movement, rhythm, and it somehow creates a bridge between the autonomic and the somatic system. So, as many of you know, dysautonomia is kind of characterized by a dysregulation of the nervous system, and the nervous system gets stuck in one state, usually the fight or flight state or the sympathetic state. And the idea is that we want to create harmony between the two states. So another one is the rebounder. And the rebounder is not used for jumping or as a trampoline. It's more used, again, for the grounding and the vibration. And it's often used actually lying down as well as standing up. And then lastly, the tuning board. So it's a kinesthetic tool that increases embodiment, stimulates postural reflex systems of the body, and it creates grounding, resourcing, curiosity. So it's similar to these other tools, but again, it's very much from this embodiment and sensorial point of view. So you can, if anyone's interested in somatic experiencing as a practice, you can go onto the website. You can type in your location. You can type in I think you can type in your postcode even, or your zip code, I think is what you call this in the US. and you can find a practitioner close to you. I think that you can even start with things like medicine platforms. So if anyone's interested to inquire into that more. So breath work is another way in which we can bridge the voluntary nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. It's one of the only functions that we can actually choose to do voluntarily, but we also don't have to choose. We don't have to think about breathing, it happens automatically. But if we do want to breathe deeply or more shallow or more fast or slow, we are able to do that. And that's different to any of the other body systems that we have. We can't control our kidneys or our liver and these different organs. So, it's because of that, it's a great tool to leverage this bridge between the voluntary and the autonomic nervous system. And one example of how to do this is through Andrew Weil's 4-7-8 breathwork technique. So how you do this is exhaling through the mouth with a whoosh sound, closing your mouth and inhaling through the nose through a count of 4, holding your breath for a count of 7, and then exhaling through the mouth through with a count of 8. And this is the kind of really simple breathwork technique that you can do at any time. And you can also, it's one of those techniques that also kind of gains momentum over time. So when you first do it, you might not notice much, or you might notice it very subtly. But as you build on it and as you do this again and again, it becomes more powerful and more impactful. So meditation is also another. I wouldn't say that maybe this goes more into managing thoughts and feelings rather than it's not necessarily it's slightly outside of the mind body practice. But I wanted to point out specifically that we were speaking about this idea of fight and flight or being trapped in the sympathetic state. So, meditation, MRI scans of people who meditate actually show that the fight or flight center or the amygdala actually shrinks when we do, after an 8-week meditation course. So, the amygdala is responsible for emotion, fear, our response to stress. And as the amygdala shrinks, the prefrontal cortex associated with things like awareness, concentration, and decision making becomes thicker. And the functional connectivity between these regions, so how often they're activated together, also changes. So the amygdala and gets weaker, while the connections between again attention, concentration gets stronger. So this is quite amazing, that after just an 8-week course of meditation and mindfulness, you can actually change your brain and the structure of it. And this is quite powerful. Um, so if anyone is interested in getting started with meditation, I would recommend this Waking Up. Waking Up is a meditation app that is designed by a neuroscientist called Sam Harris, and they offer a free day, a 7-day trial. I think it used to be 30 days. Now it's just 7 days, unfortunately. But, 7 days is enough to get a kind of insight into what the app is about. And you can start here, which is basically the introductory course. Um, and um, I believe each one is around 10 minutes, or you can choose between 10 or 20 minutes. And he introduces meditation. He's done, so many different types of meditation, like Zen and Dzogchen, metta loving kindness, and walking meditations even. So he has a lot of different influences, but his meditation app is is not religious or dogmatic or kind of tied to any particular tradition of meditation. It's very much from a secular point of view, if anyone is concerned about that. But he has many kind of he has different teachers that come on and do guest meditations. And he also has a podcast section in the app where there are different conversations and interviews with people in the meditation space. So that's also really interesting to check out. So if you do the 7-day trial, you could do something like the introductory course, but maybe also dip into some of the guest meditations and also some of the podcasts just to make the most of it. So that's it for the presentation. Um, yeah, I think that was just a bit of a deeper dive specifically on somatic experiencing and mind-body practices such as meditation, mindfulness, breath work, and somatic experiencing, of course. Because the reason why I wanted to bring more attention to these is that what I've noticed is that many people suffering from long COVID have had some kind of trauma, whether it was the death of a loved one, whether it was a car accident, some kind of workplace stress, or it could just be the normal accumulated stress of having a job that's stressful for many years and then having to look after parents, or there can be a lot of different things, but I would say that a lot of people's lives have been punctuated by a lot of stress, and their body wasn't able to really recover from it because as we talked about in the somatic experiencing part, the body recovery timeline is a lot slower than the cognition and the emotional recovery timeline. And because there's kind of a lag and a disconnect between those two, I hear a lot of people saying things like, I'm fine, I'm totally recovered from this event of this death or this car accident, and I don't really understand why my body is not over it or not suffering or still suffering. Or they'll say, this isn't really affecting me anymore, yet I still have all of these health issues. And I think that is, something to pay attention to, or to know, let's say, that just because you think in your mind that you're over or past something doesn't necessarily mean that your body is having the same experience. And if you're having many different unresolved symptoms that are characterized or brought together by dysautonomia or nervous system dysregulation, then this is definitely an area to look into. So I'm going to click on and see if anyone has any questions. So hypnotherapy, past life regression therapy. So what are your thoughts about other alternative modalities like hypnotherapy or past life regression therapy? I've never done either of those before. I think hypnotherapy can be really powerful, and it depends, I guess, why you're doing it, what the intention is to go into something like that. Um, in terms of past life regression, I think this is also um, something interesting to explore. And actually, from a science point of view, Andrew Huberman has a podcast about the epigenetics of memory. And he interviews, I'll try to find the podcast so I can share it in the show notes, but he interviews, I think, a biologist about how memories are actually passed down through generations. And this idea is, of course, is quite controversial. And I feel that it's explored a lot, maybe in this new age realm where people are exploring and diving into past lives and exploring this kind of concept, but it's not so much spoken about in the field of science. And of course, there are a lot of taboos about the idea that we can kind of pass down things from generation to another, because it can easily sort of go down this path of eugenics and things like that, which is quite controversial. But that podcast is worth checking out on that subject. Um, is it true that our bodies store trauma, which this is disguised as physical pain? Yes. Yeah, definitely. So this is one of the important, or kind of one of the main things that somatic experiencing addresses. And this is something Dr. Hyde has also spoken a lot about, this idea that some kind of trauma is actually what leads to disease and pain or whatever it is that's manifesting later on. And yeah, I mean, I think that this is complicated because, when we talk about this idea of root cause, when it comes to functional medicine, let's say, for example, you have some kind of gut health issue, and you might do all of these tests and you might find, oh, I have candida and I have H. pylori and I have this. And those are the quote unquote root cause. But in reality, they're not really the root cause, because why did you have candida or H. pylori? And often it does come back to trauma or stress or whatever, however we want to call this, but some kind of dysregulation in the nervous system that, let's say, happened in childhood or as a teenager, or at any point really, some kind of stress. And stress basically causes dysfunction in the body. And let's say you're not able to digest your food, your microbes are, you're constantly in fight and flight instead of rest and digest, which means you're not digesting your food. Which means that your gut microbiome is not working, is disrupted in some way, which means that candida and H. pylori and other pathogens can grow more, and then that has other effects like acid reflux, and maybe your food is not being digested well, so then you have nutrient deficiencies, so then you have leaky gut, and things go on in that kind of way. And what really is the root cause is a big question, because the root cause, it depends where we stop asking questions, actually. So some people might say, if you have a gut health issue, oh, it's stomach acid, that's the issue, this is why I have acid reflux, because I have too much acid. And then you look into the question more deeply, and okay, well, why do I have acid reflux? Because actually my gut flora is really disrupted and I have too much of one thing and not enough of another, and not enough good microbes. Okay, why do I have that? Oh, because you have candida and you have H. pylori. Yeah, but why do you have those things? If you keep asking and you keep digging, you'll find more and more root causes. And often what is at the root cause of this is some kind of trauma and stressor and um, dysfunction and dysregulated nervous system. So yeah, and these things are quite difficult to overcome, especially when they're chronic, and also because it's difficult to exactly pinpoint. You have to try different modalities to try to regulate the nervous system. And I'm sure, even maybe for some people looking at the presentation, it's difficult to imagine how, let's say, swinging these loops around, or the trampoline, or it's hard to imagine how these things are really doing anything, because our nervous system just seems like something that's very untangible compared to, oh, I have a deficiency and I need to take this nutrient and then it will go away, or oh, I have this pathogen, I need to take this botanical that's proven to kill this pathogen, and then it won't be there anymore. It's a lot more nebulous than that, and maybe that can make some people convinced that it's maybe not real. But if you delve into the work of Peter Levine in particular, he has two PhDs, I think, and he's written at least 4 books about trauma, and they're very scientifically rigorous. And there's really a lot written about this subject from a scientific point of view. Um, So can nervous system dysregulation be a result of hormone imbalance? Can younger age experience it, or is it just certain age groups? Yes, so actually, if you look at the previous, I didn't, last week, we also spoke about nervous system dysregulation. And one of the things that can drive nervous system dysregulation is biochemistry. So hormone imbalance, toxic over too many toxins in your body due to environmental toxins, or whether it's skincare or air pollution, things like that. Things like adrenal fatigue, too much cortisol, HPA axis dysfunction, hormone imbalance in terms of too little progesterone, which is not buffering the estrogen, and then you're having things like PMS symptoms, which are not normal, even though they're normalized. So all of anything biochemical can definitely contribute towards nervous system dysregulation, and because those things are actually a stress on the body, and nervous system dysregulation happens when our body's ability to be resilient to and regulate stress is not large enough in the face of a bigger stressor. So we're basically not returning to homeostasis, and we're not returning to baseline. And therefore, we're having a dysregulated response to more stresses that are coming in. And of course, all of these things compounded on one another, biochemistry being one of them, can lead to the dysfunction. So any thoughts on eye movement desensitization and EMDR? So yes, those are also really interesting. And again, last week we spoke about those, and I basically went over all the different mind body therapies, somatic experiencing, and the eye movement desensitization, EMDR. I think we spoke about, there are 3 or 4 other ones that we spoke about in the last modules, in the last live. So if you go back to look at that, you'll see those, and those are definitely also really great. I think it's important to find one that resonates with you specifically, and sometimes that can just be a practitioner that resonates with you. And their whatever their modality is, you'll find it useful. But I think exploring exploring the different modalities is definitely worthwhile. I think that is it for the questions. So yeah, we are about halfway through our Phoenix protocol, and we are launching another group actually in about a week or so. So Monica will put up the QR code and information about that. So if anyone would like to join the Phoenix protocol, we talk about all of these things in more depth. And you can also book a free discovery call with me to talk about, if you'd be a good fit for the program, and, speak a bit about your history and what kind of things that we do in the Phoenix protocol. It's a 2-month program, and we do a call every week on Friday at 1 p.m. EST time. So thank you everyone for listening, and I'll see you again next week.